I'm with the Department of Human Services, Division of Mental Health and Disability Services. And Sue Ann Morrow and I, who I'm sure you all know, we kind of co-lead this year's project that we have through the U.S. Department of Labor, Office of Disability Employment Policy. And they're calling the project VOICE, which stands for Visionary Opportunities to Increase Integrated Employment, or Community Integrated Employment. So that's what we come to you through for this webinar series, and we're very happy today to be kicking off the first of 5 webinars that Teresa Brandenburg is going to be presenting to us. We are doing these in the hopes of just basically getting some information out to the community. Our focus this year is on individual placement and support model of supported employment. So Teresa will be doing for us a webinar each month from now through December. And this is to help to build some awareness and interest in IPS. And hopefully we'll build some rapport and develop some infrastructure among providers here that could partner to do IPS in Iowa in the future. So Teresa Brandenburg comes to us as she is the state trainer for the state of Kentucky through the Institute on Human Development. And she's been doing that for some time and been doing supported employment for a long time. And she comes very well qualified to help us learn more about this topic. Here you will see, here are registration links for each of the webinars and the dates and times that those will be coming up. And if you have questions about that, you can contact Amy. And I am just going to go ahead now and turn it over to Teresa.
Teresa, unmute yourself.
Nobody ever really wants me to unmute myself.
Tricky Zoom.
But I'm happy to be here today with y'all. I do wish we were doing it in person because I do think that I feel a lot more comfortable and I'm a lot better in person. I'm one of these trainers that I like to walk and talk, and having to sit in front of a computer is just a little bit different for me. So I appreciate y'all's patience. As Lynn said, I'm a state trainer for the IPS program here in Kentucky. I retired from our Office of Vocational Rehabilitation in 2017.
Webinar, Marsha. You invited us to, but
And I retired from our Office of Vocational Rehabilitation in 2017, and then I came to work as an IPS state trainer. I've been involved with IPS, the implementation of IPS through the VR side, while I was in Kentucky. I've been doing supported employment with Kentucky since 2001. I became a supported employment consultant, which we were liaisons and worked with the different supported employment providers and kind of worked out differences with problems and issues that were going on and solutions to what we could do and have better quality supported employment services across the state. And then as that grew, I became the branch manager. So I do have a lot of background in supported employment. Is the one program ever since I've got my degree in vocational rehabilitation that has been really important to me. It's one of the best programs I think that's out there. You know, what better thing? I mean, we send people to play sports, and you have coaches for that. And you know, the old terminology is a job coach, and now it's employment specialist, which does sound a little bit better or more professional. But you know, being that coach for them and motivating them, getting them on, that's all part of that employment specialist job. So I'm just really excited about supported employment. So with that, to get us started off, we're going to use, I've got a little short video of one of our consumers or our clients here in Kentucky. After he went through supported employment, he liked it so much, he developed a little rap. So I just want to play that for y'all.
This is a rap about supported employment. I made it up for your end. And although I've already got me a job now, I believe my people can help you out somehow. So here's a little about my story and me. I got me a job working Best Buy, DC. Now I'm Reppin' DC 1376. My job coach Sheila got me a situational fix. You see, I was jobless and needed some dough, but now I get paid and work is where I flow. Enough about me, yeah, I know. So let's get back to you and see what my people can do. I like to start off with the serious steps. Is that a So just give it a shot before you say no way. Step one, get off the couch, get out your PJs. Put in some applications and do this the right way. Clean up, fix
Oops.
up, sit up straight. Speak up, speak out, shit, articulate. Step two should probably be step one. Organize your resume. Coach at a regular time. Are you getting all this, or am I wasting my rhyme? Step four, aim for success. I know you can do it, just give it your best. And after all, I'm an example of what you can achieve. So don't give up, friend. Just believe you can do it. Like I said, that's all there is to it. Just believe. Just believe in yourself. Just believe.
And I have to apologize. There was this little video that did go along with it. Most of it was what you heard, but I did not share my screen. So I am looking, oh, here it is. All right, so.
Yeah, and Teresa, we can always share that YouTube link out too, later, afterwards too.
Okay,
So
yeah.
if they want.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, sorry about that. I got so excited getting in there. I get ahead of myself.
No worries, no worries.
All right, so we're individual placement and support. And it is a form of supported employment that has grown not only nationally, but internationally. And then that's what we're going to talk about today, and why it's such a good thing for people with mental illness and substance use disorders to get them to go to work. So here's our objectives. We're going to we're going to do an overview. So it's just going to be a basic overview. I'm not going to dive real deep into parts of the program, because we're going to get on that into the later webinars. We're going to really talk about the Fidelity scale and what that means, and I think maybe in the next one, and different parts of it. So I'm going to wait till those to delve down deep, but you're just going to get a broad overview of it. I'm going to let you know kind of what the expectations of an IPS program is, and we're going to find out what's so special about it. Why does it work? And what people with mental illness, they want to go to work. So we're going to talk about that today. Now here's a slide that I always try to include in almost every one of my presentations, because it's just a general supported employment philosophy slide. You have to believe that everybody, regardless of disability, everyone can work. And I believe this. I don't care what type of disability they have. If they want to work, there is a job out there for them. Now, if you don't believe that, this employment, as an employment specialist, if you don't believe that, that can make this job a lot harder for you. So just take that into consideration. It's no reflection on you, but it's just, you've got to have that belief that everybody can work. And our primary goal is not to change the person to fit into a slot that we think they can fit in, but it's to find a natural fit with that person and a job, looking at that person's strengths, what they can do, what other job experiences if they had any job experiences, maybe chores and things that they've done around the house, what other things have they done. But we want to match that person with a job so that it's a good natural fit for that person and for the employer. Now, I love this cartoon, and it's been around us for years, and we've always used it. But, this just talks about people and jobs. You have Linus. I would hate to have a job where I had to get up early in the morning. Well, if you're working with somebody like Linus and you get him a first shift job, that's probably not going to work out so well for him. So right off the bat with him, you want to start with something that's going to start probably after lunch. And then with Charlie Brown, I'd hate to have a job where I had to stay in the same place all day. Now here's one where you might have to dig a little deeper, because the same place doesn't mean the same building or in the same workspace, or does it mean you're traveling from place to place to place? So you have to dig a little bit deeper, but I can understand that because I'm like Charlie Brown. I've never had a job where I've had to stay in the same place all the time. And I think if I had being here at my house, working every day on a computer is a little stressful because I'm used to being able to go out and go. And then Lucy here is one that I'd hate to have a job where you had to be nice to everybody. Now, you know, this sounds just like Lucy, and I'm sure we probably can think of people in our heads that are Lucy. But, you know, so you would not want to get Lucy a job in customer service because you don't want to have her to have to deal with the public. Probably the least amount of that she had to deal with people would be that. But that's the one great thing about being an employment specialist is you get to take and get to know the people and learn what they like, what they don't like. You know, you'll talk to the person, during the assessment phase, you'll talk to the person, but you also talk to family members if they'll let you, to friends if they'll let you, to their therapist, to their case manager, to the prescriber, and get a good, well-rounded idea of what this person can do. And so why is there a need for IPS? Well, IPS, there's 66, this is just it's a national statistic. 66% of the adults with mental illness want to work. Only 20% are working, and only 2% have access to employment services. And it's within a few percentage points of each state of the same thing. So it's really sad to think when you got 66% of your adults that want to work, but only 20% of them are working. But if more than 2% had access to the employment services, how many more people could go to work and have that meaningful life? So, and as we're talking about data, I'm just going to share a little bit of Kentucky's data because it's the easiest one for me to get to. And here is January through March of 2020. So this is what I call our pre-COVID quarter because it is just before everybody went into kind of lockdown with COVID. And you can see what we serve. We have about 18 programs here in Kentucky. We served 786 people in January through March. We had 254 working, 18 were in schools. We enrolled 196 new people. We had 95 job starts. I want y'all to keep that in mind. That's the first quarter, 95 job starts. And we had 32% working. Now we go over April through June, which is our COVID quarter. And as I was thinking, and most of the people on my team were thinking, we didn't think that this quarter would end up very good at all because, you know, people are being laid off from jobs. They're not, they're going on unemployment. So there's not a lot of jobs out there, it didn't seem. But look, we served 691. We still had 217 working. We enrolled 104 during this quarter, which I think is phenomenal. We had 87 job starts. That's less than 10 job starts from the previous quarter. So I think that's amazing that even during this time, we were able to still go out and have job starts. And our percentage of working only dropped 1% to 31%. So that's something that I'm really pleased about. And I think it's really interesting when you start looking at the numbers and the data that shows. And you'll learn that this program is driven by data for everything. Now, you may want to know, what is IPS? How is it different from other supported employment programs? Well, IPS, it's a model of supported employment, and it's specifically geared to people with serious mental illness and co-occurring disorders. So it's for people that have schizophrenia, or they may be bipolar, they may have depression, they may have schizoaffective disorder, they could have a personality disorder, anything like that. And that's what this program is geared for. And it's to help people that have behavioral health conditions to go to work at regular jobs in the community. So they're not jobs that are set aside for people with disabilities. They're not sub-minimum wage. They're not a competitive wage payer that's set aside for people with disability. These are strictly jobs that you and I or anybody could go and apply for that are out in the community. That's the employment we're looking at. It is evidence-based. They've done trials on this and studied it for years and years before it was ever put out. And it also looks at supported education and technical training as ways to include people to advance career paths too. So it's also looking at that. So we're talking about a little bit about the history of IPS. There was 27 randomized control trials that showed a significant advantage of IPS over other programs. So it's not just people, not just Dartmouth University coming out and saying, oh, well, our program's the best. There's actually studies that prove that this is the best way and the best route to go for people with significant mental illness and co-occurring disorders. It began at Dartmouth University and it transitioned over to IPS Westat. And you may wonder why that happened, but Johnson & Johnson Foundation used to sponsor the IPS program at Dartmouth. And then they, back in, I think it was 2016, kind of went into another direction. And at that time, it transitioned over to the IPS Center at Westat because they are a group that houses professional organizations that work with government and other entities in the United States here and internationally. And then you'll hear me refer to, we have an international learning collaborative with IPS. So it's not just here in the States, it's in countries. We have 6 countries that it's in. So it began with just 3 sites in 2001. So in 19 years, it's grown into having 24 US states and regions and 6 countries, which I think is pretty amazing. And that it transitions from the United States to other countries very well. And this is what IPS has studied, and they keep doing studies and everything about IPS. What they have learned is that if you go through an IPS program, you're going to get employed. You'll have three times as many people to become employed, and you're going to become employed faster than other programs. Jobs are held longer. I think that's because we match the people with the jobs and the client drives that program, and you're really listening to what the client wants and needs are. And our clients work more hours 4 times other than other programs. And I know y'all can't see me, but I'm moving my hands. I can't talk without my hands. But the IPS is more effective than any, it's also more effective than any alternative vocational approaches, regardless of background. So regardless of gender, socioeconomic factors, it doesn't matter. This has proved that it works across the board. So it's proven that it not only works across the board here in the United States, it works across the board we have Spain, New Zealand, Montreal, are just 3 of the places that I can think of right off the top of my head that have IPS programs. So here's some of the characteristics of the IPS. It's evidence-based, and that's what we just talked about, those 27 random trials. So they've actually it took years, they did studies to find out the best way to assist people with mental illness to go to work. And what they came up with was the IPS program and the Fidelity scale and how to do it. Now, another characteristic is we focus on the person's strengths. And sometimes it's really sad because sometimes nobody's really ever had focused on that person's strengths before. They always look at their deficits. And when you're diagnosing and all that stuff, that's what you're looking for. And when you're trying to treat, how are we going to treat those deficits to make them positives? But this is one of the first times that we don't worry about those deficits. We look at what that person's strengths are and what they can do, what they want to do. And it's proven that work promotes recovery and wellness. And we'll get into a little bit more of that further on the slide. I'll talk more about recovery and wellness. IPS uses a multidisciplinary team approach. It is when I say that, it's because it is a team approach. It's not just the employment specialist that's working out there by themselves or with the VR counselor to get this person a job. They're working with the person's case manager, their therapist, their prescriber. Everybody's involved and can have a little piece of, well, we've got this going on with this person. What do you think? What would be a good coping skill? Or can you give us some coping skills for this person? So, just working and having that team approach really helps with the person getting employed and staying employed. The person's services are individualized and they last as long as the person wants or needs them. And when I mean, they're individualized because, you may have 3 people with schizophrenia, but they may have totally 3 different needs. Same diagnosis, but they're not going to need the same level of support, just depending on the severity of it and the way it manifests in them. So just keep that in mind. Everything is individualized. There's no set thing for each person or for each diagnosis. And really, IPS has changed the way that mental health services are delivered, because in the past, work was really never thought about as a part of the recovery process. It was always thought about something that maybe could be done down the road when the person gets stable or when the person is medication compliant, when they've been through therapy for a while, when they've been sober for a while. But the IPS approach has really changed that with that when they want to work, let's get them to work. So, and with that, this is what the key concepts are. It's very fast paced. From the time the employment specialist does the intake with the person, in 30 days, they want that employment specialist doing a job development activity. So it's very rapid pace. So you take the intake, you're doing the assessment, then you're into job development, then you're into outcome, and then you're into long-term supports. So it's not something that drags out for months and months and months and months. You want to do it and get it done because you want to strike while the iron's hot. Because, if somebody needs a job now, they need a job now. They don't need 1, 2, or 3 months down the road. They don't want to wait that long. By that time, you'll lose them. And IPS is based on the client's interest. So it's all about what they're interested in, and it's client-centered. These two kind of go together. You're looking at what their interests are, not what your interests are, and it's what they want, not necessarily what you as an employment specialist or their therapist thinks would be the best for them. It's all about what that client wants. Because let's face it, we've all had jobs, and I'm sure we've all had jobs that we probably didn't like and are probably not in them, or at least I hope we're not in them today. I've had jobs that I didn't like and I moved out of them really quickly. So probably if you get them a job and it's not something that they're interested in, it's not going to last. So you want to make that good job match there. It's competitive employment. Like I said, it's not jobs set aside for people with disabilities. It is any job that's out there that anybody can apply for. So any of them that are on those websites like Indeed or Indeed or anything out in the community that you can do, it's competitive, is out there. And then there's time and limited job supports. And, this sounds kind of scary, but it's really not, because once you start working with people and you place them in the right job and you build those natural supports in there, they're going to not have that much of a need for job supports. And what we see is that generally, you may have some intense services right up in the first couple of weeks that somebody's working, but then the employment specialist starts backing out, and then the job supports may be very minimal after that. That's the wonderful thing about having them placed in the right job. Now here's some quotes, and I love this one. What people want most is a job, a car, and a date on a Friday night. Pat Deegan said that. What better way to get that than to get a job? If you get a job, you can get a car. And if you have a car, you can have a date. So it kind of all plays in there together. And that's really, think about it, that's mostly what we want out of life is we want a job. We'd like to have a car that we can get around in. And it's nice to have somebody to go out with on a Friday night or a Saturday night. So that's just what people do. And then the other one, and I think we really found this out in the last couple of months, is if you think work is stressful, you should try an employment. That's Joe Marone said that. And yeah, I mean, I think we probably all know somebody that has lost their job due to COVID and how stressful it is for them with unemployment and going through that whole thing. So, you know, work may be stressful, but unemployment can be more stressful. So we're going to talk about recovery right now. Now, recovery refers to the process in which people are able to live, work, and participate, learn and participate in their communities. So recovery is a process, and it's usually maybe a fairly long process, and people take it in stride, but they learn to live and do different things. Work, if they're working, they're meeting people, they're doing things, they're taking their money, they're paying taxes. They're learning to live with their mental illness and learning how to handle it. And they're able to participate out in their communities by, you know, like I said, they're spending money, so they're generating the economy, they're paying taxes, they may be going to festivals within the community, or they could be volunteering at maybe one of the local theaters. There could be a lot of things that and gives them an opportunity to participate in their communities that they may not have had if they hadn't have gone to work and built this up. So what does recovery and employment do? Well, is there anything more normal than going to work? You know, it really promotes that sense of normalcy, because we see people every day that get up, go to work, come home. And that, you see that, and that just promotes that normalcy. Everybody works, so that's pretty normal to see people in a work situation. If you're not working, or if you're out, I mean, you see people when you're out every day working there. If you go to the grocery store, there's people working there. You go to the bank, there's people working there. You go to the doctor's office, there's people working there. So you're constantly seeing that people working. So it's very normal for work. And then it's a financial aid, because if you're sitting there and you're living off of a Social Security check or SSI or SSDI check, you may just have enough to cover your bare expenses. So food, clothing, and shelter, that may be the only thing that you're able to do. But so having to work is going to free you up financially to do other things, like to buy the car, to go on that date, to go on a trip. So it just really helps them boost financially. And also, and the next one is social interaction. And I think you all have to admit, I have found out how much I miss social interaction while being here and having to work from home 5 days a week. So, you know, I didn't realize how much I missed social interaction with people when COVID first hit. You know, about once a week, I would have to go out to the drugstore, the Walgreens, because I knew there's very few people there. So I could go in, see people, interact with the cashier by buying something, and leave. And that would give me a social interaction when I didn't have it at home, because I live by myself. I have 2 fur babies, and they're not much on talking sometimes. But so social interaction can be very important in recovery. And being a part of the community, you know, working, paying taxes, going to plays, going to the movies, going out shopping, being a part of that community that you live in. That's a very important thing. And there's structure. You know, a lot of times, if you don't have structure in your life, your life can really become kind of a mess. At least I'll talk about myself again when COVID first started, and I didn't have the structure of working, of, okay, this is what I'm going to do today, you know, and my structure may be different every day, but at least I had it. And now it's like, okay, I've got to come here. I've got to figure out what I need to do. And I got to talk to this person and a Zoom with this person. And, you know, but I didn't really have a set structure program, you know, to do what I needed to do. So structure, it gives people structure, which we all need. And if we're productive, we're going to feel better about ourselves. We want to feel productive. You know, if you have a task list that you check off when you do something, doesn't it feel really good to check off that, to make that check mark and go, yes, that's done. I don't have to worry about that anymore. So being productive in a job is going to boost somebody's self-esteem. They're going to feel better about themselves. And it just contributes to all aspects of their life. You know, everything, if you think about it, what we do in life pretty much revolves around our work. If we're going to do something, we're either able to do it because of the money that we make from work, or we can't do it because we got to work, or something like that. So, you know, it contributes to all aspects of our life, and it provides us with independence. If we're making money, we're not just bound to that check every month that from SSI. We have independence. We can move around. We can get that car. We can do things. We can do more things. And sometimes that's a little scary for the caregivers, maybe. So you may have to deal with a little bit of that, but it just provides so much independence for people to be able to work. All right, I'm on backspace because okay. This is a video that I'm going to show that it is Jeannie. It's a video that's off the IPS website, so you can go there. They've got several videos there that I highly suggest that you go and look at. But this talks about Jeannie, talks about her recovery. She is substance use disorder and mental illness. So it talks about how IPS helped her.
My name's Jeannie, and I have a substance abuse problem and a mental illness. I started using alcohol, of course, when I was around 13, graduated to marijuana, and at the age of 20, I went on to heroin. Later on in life, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
My name's Pam.
Hi, Pam. The integrated program was the best thing that had ever happened to me. And one of the goals that I chose for myself was to go back to work and to become employable again. The supported employment program helped me to get employment by giving me an employment specialist who worked closely with me. She helped me write my resume, helped me with some interviewing skills. Through that, I gained employment. It was a technical job in a hospital, and it was in a patient equipment repair department. And my employment specialist was right there all the time, helping me to go through these phases. I believe that getting a job and being successful, keeping the job, helped me in my recovery by making me feel like I was a productive human being. After a while, I didn't want to have that abuse problem anymore because I wanted to get up and be 100%. Having a job in recovery is really important. It's to take up some of that idle time, and you don't have a me situation where you're constantly thinking about you. You're out in the world, and it's just it's a good feeling. It's a real good feeling to be productive.
I think we all have to agree with that. That's really a feeling to just be productive each day. So here we're going to talk about the benefits of working. And you've heard me talk a little bit about it before. You know, working increases our self-esteem and it increases our self-confidence. And with that, when you see somebody's self-esteem go up and their self-confidence go up, you know what happens to them? I mean, you can see it. Their whole body language changes. They'll look better. They'll dress better. They'll feel better about themselves. They'll stand taller. You know, you will just notice it in the way they carry themselves. That when they're doing so much better. And like Jenny talked about, decreased substance usage because they have that structure in their day. They're not bored anymore. There's not that idle time, and they have something to do. And then, like she talked about, the more she did, the better she wanted to be. So, oops. Sorry about that. All right. Had something pop up on my screen, and it's like, I didn't mean to click on it, but evidently I did. So we'll go back. So sorry for the interruption, but we're talking about decreased substance usage. So the more people work, it's been proven they will decrease that substance usage. And like she said, she wanted to do better, so she didn't want to use that substance anymore. She wanted to do better. We had a client here in Kentucky that really used mainly in the afternoon. And, you know, he told his employment specialist, he said, give me a job in the afternoon because that's what I want to use. And if I'm working during that time, I won't have time to use. And you know what? That worked. So sometimes it can be just something as simple as that, but it will help decrease that substance usage. And it also increases independence. You know, when we feel better about ourselves, we feel and confident, you know, we feel we can make those decisions. We can be a lot more independent with what we're doing. And then all this shows also is a decrease in symptoms. So if there's a decrease in symptoms, that's great. People are doing better, and their symptoms are lighter, and it's working, and they're able to work more. And it also, with the decrease in symptoms, we also have a decrease in hospitalizations. So really the only people that are probably upset about the decrease in symptoms, decrease in hospitalizations, is probably the hospitals at this point. But we do have all of this goes hand in hand, and they're all benefits of working. And here's a quote from Ethan Price, and he was a team leader at PH Mental Health Center, and they did one of the programs for IPS. And I love what he says. It's a long quote, but I'm just going to kind of hit the high points. But the first sentence is really great. IPS has created opportunities for our members to obtain what they want most, a meaningful life. And isn't that what we all want? We want our life to be meaningful. So, and I don't know about y'all, but going to work gives me meaning. It gives me something to do every day. If I just retired and not worked, you know, it would have been bad. My life would not look like it does now. I've got a feeling, because I would want that meaningful life. With IPS, the rapid engagement, the dedicated employment staff, our members are able to quickly find the job that they want and begin building an empowered life based on what their wants and needs are, while also gaining a vast array of skills. And that's the one good thing about when they go to work. It's that they may start off at one job and they learn skills from that job, and then they'll want to move on up and move up the career ladder and learn more skills as they go along. And what we said in the slide before that, this has led to improved mental health functioning, improved physical health, and overall functioning. So working and recovery works with working. IPS has been a success for many of our members, and we are looking forward to using the model to assist more of our members and hoping that it can spread across the state to assist others as well. So I think that is a glowing recommendation from Ethan, that not only is it working for their members, but he would love to see it work for other people across the state. So now we're going to talk about, we talked a little bit about the characteristics before, and here are the 8 principles of IPS, and this is kind of what they focus on. So we've already talked about it. Focus on competitive employment, jobs that are out there in the community that anybody can apply for. They're not jobs that are set aside for somebody with a mental illness or just any type of disability. It's jobs that are out there in the community. And eligibility is based on client choice. Now, this is the one you may have heard it referred to as zero exclusion. And it's a little ticking point with some people, and you might have to get the thinking around, but eligibility based on client choice, all that client has to say to be eligible for IPS is, I want to work. And then they're eligible for IPS. It doesn't matter if they're using, it doesn't matter if they're medication compliant, it doesn't matter if they're going to therapy or not, it doesn't matter if the therapist doesn't think that they need to work, it doesn't matter, all that doesn't matter. If that client says he wants to work, that's all it takes for them to be eligible for IPS. Now, if you're working in conjunction with vocational rehabilitation, that's not going to make them automatically eligible for vocational rehabilitation. They still have to go through that eligibility process. But for IPS, that's all it takes to make them eligible. So it's that zero exclusion. It's one of the best. It's probably my favorite principle because it gives everybody a chance. And then there's integration in the rehabilitation and mental health treatment teams. So it really does. You remember the old saying, it takes a village? It does take a village with IPS. I mean, you want your employment specialists embedded in those mental health treatment teams, not only for when they staff the cases that the employment specialist is working with, but when they're staffing other cases, that employment specialist maybe go, well, have you thought, if you're having this issue with somebody, have you thought about work for that person? Maybe that would help. And so, it's a way to get new referrals too into your program. And then IPS principles continued are, we have attention to workers' preferences. So we're looking at what that person's preferences are, not what the employment specialist preferences are, not what their family members' preferences are, not what the therapist's preferences are, but what that worker's preferences are. That's what we're looking at, and that's where we're going to base start with the career profile and the job search. And then another thing that is very beneficial, because especially, if you know somebody that is living month to month on an SSDI check or an SSI check, personal benefits counseling is a must. And this is one of the key components of IPS, that everybody that has some type of benefits has personal benefits counseling. So we want them to meet with a CWIC to learn about how going to work is going to affect their check. Most of the time, I'd say 98% of the time, it's going to affect it in a positive way, but making them realize that. Yes, because SSDI, if I'm not mistaken, y'all may have to correct me, but once you get it past that $60, the first part of it, they'll take $1 away of your check for every $2 you make. So you're still making money and you're getting more money out of it. So it's helping people to realize that and learning all that and understanding it. And benefits is not always the easiest thing to understand. So it's something that you may have to do a little studying up on. I know I have to whenever I'm trying to talk about them or with somebody. I always have that red book with me or something so that I can refer back to it when I'm trying to talk about benefits. And then there's the rapid job search. And that's what we talked about. We talked that IPS goes from a rapid pace from intake to career profile to job development to outcome to long-term supports. Well, with rapid job search, they really want, the key is to, from the first day of intake, the first time you do an intake for that person to become a part of the IPS program, within 30 days, you are expected to do a job development activity. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you've got to apply for a job for that person, but it does mean you're going to do a job development activity. So it could be that you may still be in the middle of the career profile and learning about the person and assessment and learning about what that person likes. But maybe you decide, you find out that this person really likes to sew. And maybe during this time of COVID, they had made a lot of masks and donated them, and they made them really well. So, and they would like to sew clothes or do alterations or something like that. So at that point in time, you might not take the person with you, but you may go out and talk to a tailor or to a seamstress or to somebody that does alterations or stores that do alterations and find out about that job with that person in mind and write that up. And that would be considered part of job development. So, but that's what that rapid job search is. I just don't want you to get too scared about that. Because when people say, oh, you got to be looking for a job in 30 days, it can kind of make people a little bit like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do that? And here's the principle: systematic job development. And this is what IPS calls 3 cups of tea. And it's because you're not just going and applying for jobs willy-nilly. I call that the shotgun approach. You are going to, you have your client, you know what that client, what type of jobs that client wants. You make a list of maybe the employers that do that. And then you go and talk to the employer. So, but the first time you go and talk to the employer, you're not going to even mention that the person that you have somebody that's looking for a job. You're just going to go in there and say, I'm an employment specialist with Acme Employment Company, and I match people with jobs, and I would really like to know more about what you do. Could we set up a time that I could come back and talk to you about your business? And then you'd set up that time, and then the second time, that's the first cup of tea. The second cup of tea is you go back and you're in there and you learn about that person's business. So you made the meeting and you learned about that person's business, and you still may not mention that you have somebody interested in it, but you may ask some more pointed questions like, what type of person usually does really well here? In this job over here, what type of person describe? What skills do you think would work best for a person that's working here? So kind of ask those open-ended questions about that. And then the third time you go back, you may be going back with that job applicant and talking to that manager saying that, this is where, I've got this person, I think they'd be really good. They have these attributes, and talking to them. Or if the person chooses not to disclose, you may be sending that person in there by themselves to talk about it. It all depends. But that would be the third cup of tea. So it's building up you want to build those relationships with employers. And then we have time and limited and individualized job supports. So what this means is that for vocational lifetime, that person has those individual job supports that they need for as long as they have the job, or for as long as they're working. So what this can be is, like I said, everything's individualized, and you may have some people that you can transition off your caseload. And what we look at is that usually a person is on a caseload from about a year from when they start working. And then we look at transition them off that employment specialist caseload so they can take somebody else on. But we don't just drop them. We don't, say, bye, see you later, good luck. But they have that's where the treatment team is important, because they have that treatment team around them. So they still have a case manager, a therapist, a prescriber. And they can kind of take over those job supports and talk to them when they talk to them about, well, how's the job going? This and that. So, but if the person loses their job, as soon as they lose their job and the employment specialist finds out about it, they have 48 hours to contact that person to start doing job development again, if that's what they want to do. So that's kind of time and we'll get into more of what I said about the 48 hours and all that probably when we did the Fidelity review, but that's kind of in the principles. And then you've heard me refer to the Fidelity scale, and we're going to get more of that in a later training, but it's a 25-item scale that was developed from all this research, and it's divided into 3 sections: staffing, organization, and services. So it's going to tell you, it's going to look at your staffing, and it has a certain way of what it considers staffing that will work. So you're looking at that. You're looking at organization. What does your organization do? What are things? They'll talk, and during the organization, when they're doing a review, they'll talk to maybe a prescriber, a clinical therapist, or a case manager, or all 3. They'll talk to the executive team, looking at different things for the organization to see how they help build that program up, or build the IPS program up. And then they're going to look at services. They'll look at the job development services. They'll actually, when they're doing a Fidelity review, actually go out and job shadow the employment specialist to see how they do job development. You'll talk to clients, how they're getting services. So even though it's a 25-item Fidelity scale, they have a manual. I'm gonna see if I can show it here. You can get this. You can purchase that off the IPS website, or you can download it for free. Just if you want it all in there, if you want to bind it yourself. But it's about 226 pages, and it's going to tell you how to implement this Fidelity scale and what each one of them mean. And then with the Fidelity scale, it actually summarizes the basic characteristics of the evidence-based program of supported employment. So it's really a roadmap for services. So this is going to really tell you how you're going to implement IPS and what's expected of you. It's the 25-item scale, and each item is 1, it's the least amount you can get, and 5 being the greatest amount you could get. And so what it looks at is it'll add up your scores at the end. 74 or below is not considered supported employment. 75 to 99 is considered fair. 100 to 114 is considered good, and 115 to 125 is considered exemplary. So that's what you're looking for. And usually the higher the program is on the Fidelity scale, the better results that they have. Also, with Fidelity, it refers to how well a particular program follows the key components of the evidence-based practice. So that's what they're looking for. Are you following those key components when they do a fidelity review? And if you're not, how can we help you to do that? What needs to be done? In most cases, it's just a little tweak here and there that can help. And there may be some programs that just by the basis of the way the program's set up that you might have to take a hit on one fidelity item, but you can bring it up in another. And I'll share with that when we go on to the fidelity scale, because there'll be some of the things that we've learned here in Kentucky. And it's not used, the fidelity scale is not used as a punishment. It's used as a quality improvement tool to help for you to get better outcomes, for you to get more jobs. It also looks at what the agency is doing well. What I like to tell people is that we're not Medicaid. We're not coming in there to get a reimbursement if you didn't dot an I and cross a T. We're looking at if you didn't dot that I and cross a T, how can we get you to do that? And in my role as a state trainer is what can I help best to how we can get you to improve on that that key part of the fidelity scale. So that's where, and it also, like I said, we also look at what the agency's doing well. Sometimes here in Kentucky, we have an employment supervisors meeting every quarter. And during that time, if we find something that's really good that the program's doing, we'll do a program spotlight and let them present to all the supervisors what they've done in their program and what's working well. Which is a good way to build up a little rapport and self-esteem with them. All right, so the IPS team. The IPS team consists of one supervisor per 10 employment specialists. And that's said here, at least 2 employment specialists. Now, we do have programs that may start off with the supervisor and 1 employment specialist, but if you can do 2 employment specialists, it just works out better because they can work together. A lot of times, going out and doing job development and cold calls may be a little daunting, and if they go out together and have that support, that can be good. They just both can't count that as a contact for employer. Only one can count it at a time. So you may have one person take the lead and they would count that, and the next person take the lead on the other, count the contacts. The VR counselor is a very important part of the team. They meet with them every month. The clients, when you're working with VR, we have found here in Kentucky that the best thing to do is if you can have 1 VR person per program, or at least per employment specialist to work with, because that way, because there's certain nuances of this program that they need to know and understand. And then as the program grows, you can go out to more counselors, because believe me, as they see one counselor get positive employment outcomes from it, they're going to want to come on board and get some of those too. And then you have treatment teams. Treatment teams are very important to the way this works. The IPS program should get about 95% of their referrals should come from the treatment team, and about 5% should come from outside that, because the treatment teams are really important when you're working with that individual, because if something happens, if something's going on, you can go and talk to the therapist or to the case manager or to the prescriber. Maybe they're really having some trouble with some meds, and you can talk to the prescriber about, is there anything that we can do, or can you change them to something else? What can happen? So it's really good to have that treatment team with you and to be able to have a successful IPS program. And then to have a state trainer like me who can come in and work directly with the programs, that has some experience, that can help implement the programs, can look at when you've gone through a fidelity review and maybe you have some areas that you need to improve on, the state trainer can come and help you work with those. So a state trainer should be considered part of your team. So we're going to talk a little bit about the IPS supervisor's role. Now, when we first started here in Kentucky, somehow it got out that they could do it like a quarter. It could be a quarter of a person's time. There is no way that a person can adequately supervise an IPS program with 25% of their time during the week. It has to be a minimum of 50. And it always works. The programs always seem to work better when they have a full-time supervisor in that role. But I know with budget and all that stuff, you kind of have to do what you got to do. But they really do need, whoever is just the IPS supervisor needs to be able to devote at least half their time and job to this role. Because they're going to conduct weekly unit meetings with their employment specialists. They're going to talk about the successes that they had, maybe the job development issues that have cropped up. It's going to probably last about an hour each week, and what they should be sure of, but they're going to conduct those unit meetings. This is what we call kind of a group goal, and you set goals. It's a group. You set goals for this team during this meeting. And, you know, we all need goals set for us because we need something to strive for. If we don't know what we're working for or what we're looking at, we're just kind of treading water. And then the IPS supervisor also trains new team members. So as the team grows and the IPS program grows and you put on more employment specialists, then it's that supervisor's role to train those team members into how to do things, the career profile, the job development, and how to do those things. And then you're going to attend, and they also attend the treatment teams at least once a quarter, just to be sure that everything's going right and that employment specialist is embedded in that team and takes an active part in that team. And if they don't take an active part in the team, then they're going to work with that employment specialist about why they're not taking an active part in the team and how they can do that better. And then also field mentoring. So they're going to go out into the field and maybe help them with job development. This will be with a new person. They may go out and teach how to do job development, or if they have somebody that's maybe struggling a little bit with job development and hadn't been able to get their 6 face-to-face contacts in a week, or they just haven't been successful in getting people placed. So you going out there and maybe looking and helping them tweak things to where they can get people placements. And then doing individual supervision. And this varies. I think IPS requires it to be like at least once a quarter that the supervisor meets with a employment specialist and talks about their goals and what's going on and how they can better help them. But so at least once a quarter. Most of the providers that I work with do it once a month. I have seen some of them do it once a week when they have a new person coming on for the first couple of months, because there's really a lot going on, and that kind of helps facilitate the training a little bit. And then you also have a steering committee meeting that the supervisor leads, and you have one of these every quarter until you get good fidelity. And after you get good fidelity, then you can start having them every 6 months. But these steering committees are really important because you put people on the steering committees that are going to help you implement this program and maybe give you ideas of when something's not going right, and then there's somebody you can brag to when something is going very well too. So it's a good thing. Steering committees are very beneficial for the implementation of the program. And then you have, like I said, data collection. We talked about data a while ago, and I showed you what you're going to have to collect, but data is everything, and data kind of drives the system, and you'll look at that. All programs look at data. We're looking at employment, percent employed. You know, are you getting that? We're at a state right now where, like I said, we're at a 31% employment. We want to be up to about 40%, and we have bounced around usually between 35 to 45% over the last 10 years. We're down a little bit right now, but you know that's not. We're not horribly down. We're working on it. So you want to do the data collection. And the employment supervisor is kind of a liaison for everything. They're a liaison to the treatment team, to the executive team, to the steering committee. So that, you know, they kind of help work on things, and even to VR. You know, if things aren't going well with something, they kind of try to go in and negotiate and facilitate that relationship a little to make it a little bit better. All right, and then the employment specialist, and the employment specialist is what I call the meat and potatoes of the program, because they do so much stuff and are so vitally important, and it's so vitally important that you have the right person for this job in order for it to work, because they perform all phases of IPS. So that means they go from they do the intake, they do the career profile or the assessment, whatever y'all choose to use. They will do the job development. They're going to do the long-term supports. So, they do all the phases of it. So that somebody that's got to be pretty quick, think on their feet, and very flexible to be able to do all of this. They're going to spend 65% of their time out in the community. So if somebody wants to sit in the office all the time, this is not the job for them. But if they like to be on the go and moving all the time, and they, like that cartoon says, Charlie Brown said, I don't like to be in the same place all the time, this would be a great job for them because they're not going to be in the same place for the time. They're going to be out and moving in the community. We want 65% of your time out in the community. And they look at that on the Fidelity review to see what you're making. And they have been able to correlate that if you're not spending 65% of your time out in the community or close to that, then you're not going to have as many placements. So it directly correlates the time in the community with your job placements. And then minimum 6 face-to-face employer contacts per week. And this is with a hiring authority. So you have to make at least 6 face-to-face contacts with an employer per week. And you have to, and it only counts if you talk to, if you're talking to somebody with hiring authority. So you can go in and maybe the manager's not there and you might learn a lot of great information from an employee that you talk to, but it doesn't count as an employer contact. You should still write that up because it gives you some really good information, but you need to go back and when that person's going to, when the hiring person with hiring authority is going to be there and talk to them for it to count. And then they provide on and off the job supports. So if a person chooses to disclose, they may provide some supports on the job. If they choose not to disclose, they may only provide off-job supports. So they're all individualized. It just depends on what each person wants and needs. In the employment role, also they attend the weekly treatment team meetings. Those are required. They have to do that. They're going to learn a lot. That employment specialists will share job leads during that time. If they have an employer that they have built up a really good relationship, and that employer may have a job, and call that employment specialist, hey, I got this job here. Have you got anybody that would be good for it? Well, I don't really have anybody, but let me talk to my coworkers. And so they might, in a treatment team meeting, they might say, well, this employer is hiring for this specific job and they want these qualifications. Do you have anybody on your caseload that might meet those? So it's very important, those weekly treatment team members, because you're passing off information to each other and you're also motivating and building each other up during this time. And you provide education and support to the employers, about the person, what their needs are, what maybe accommodations maybe need to make, things like that. And it's also important that you have timely intervention. So if you're talking to an employer and something's not going right on that job, that you immediately go and meet with that person and talk to them, so that before it becomes a real problem and they lose their job because of it, maybe you can intervene and work something out so that they can stay in that job. And then here's what I do, the state trainer. And this whole big thing right here, technical assistance, is the biggest piece of it because everything can be considered under technical assistance. But we do anything from working, we go over IPS with at least this is our program, we go over IPS with all the new employment specialists and meet them. But if somebody's having trouble, we may be going out and doing job development with them. We may be meeting with the executive director to talk about IPS with that program. Just it's a variety, we can do anything. As long as it's to build up that IPS program, it's pretty much within our realm, I think. We do mentoring. So just like field mentoring, the supervisor does field mentoring for the employment specialist, we do a lot of mentoring for supervisors and what they're doing and helping them get everything done and figure out better ways to do things. Some of the things, we'll attend a team meeting every once in a while and just to be sure, see how things are going and talk with everybody and see what's going on. And I do a lot of them by Zoom right now because during this time when, nothing is the same. Most people are working remotely and they're having to do those remote job developments, but they're doing them and they're actually doing a really good job because they're getting placements. So, attending the team meetings. And then we conduct a statewide supervisors meeting at least once a quarter. During the COVID time, we've been doing it because things have been kind of strange and everybody was, oh my goodness, and just everything was just so, I hate to say chaos, but not, nobody really knew what was going on for a long time or how things were going to play out. So we've gone to monthly supervisor meetings that we do via Zoom, and It's worked out really well, and we'll do like an hour's worth of training, and then we'll talk with some stuff about the supervisors that we need to, and that's been really well received during this time. And then an IPS trainer may at first be responsible for the Fidelity reviews, and that's good. But they're also going to need a second person to help them with that. It really goes better if you have two, because you have people you have somebody that does the interviewing and going out in the field with the employment specialist, but they also have people that need to review charts. And if you have one person, if you can do it in 2 days if you have two people. But if you only have one person, it may take 3 days or more. Or unless you have, what we found out now through COVID that is really good, is that some agencies will actually let you have, if they have EMRs, they'll let you actually have, be able to access those files online. And if you can do that, that would help with the state trainers that just had it, that if they were just doing it one at a time. Actually, as we grew as a state in Kentucky, we ended up hiring a Fidelity monitor. So what we do here is that we have a Fidelity monitor, and that's all she does is the Fidelity reviews. And then she works with our head trainer, Lori Norton, and Lori works with her on all the Fidelity reviews, except for the ones that are the programs that she works with. And then one of the other three of us will go in that case. But that's how we do it here in Kentucky. And here's some of the best implementation process. I think it seems to work. I've talked to other states, and it just seems to work best if it's jointly brought in between the state or region by behavioral health and vocational rehabilitation, because behavioral health may take the lead on it and bringing it in, and they have the mental health centers right there. But vocational rehabilitation also has, their goal is also to get people with disabilities employed. So it's a good thing to work together. And vocational rehabilitation actually has money that they can pay for some services. So you can work that out. I'm sure that vocational rehabilitation sometimes pays for the supported employment services that you do that are not IPS. So that's something that you could talk to them and work with. It's just, and we're going to talk about how, I think in December, we talk about how they all work together. But it's a little tricky, because you have counselors that are set. We have counselors that are set in their ways, and this is the way we've always done it. And we try to come in and get them to do a new thing. And like, what do you mean I have to make an eligibility decision within 30 days? And we need to get the plan done. So, and getting them to move fast, because VR has never been a program, at least in Kentucky, that has ever moved very fast. So sometimes just trying to create that. And so you're going to have to work with that on the implementation. That's going to be very important. And I know one thing that VR had in Kentucky when we first implemented is that somebody had to be sober for 6 months before we'd consider paying for training or even really working with them in a job. They had to have some measure of stability in that sobriety. With this, they don't even have to be sober. They can be using it and we'll still work with them. That was a big change for VR, but I have to say it's taken about 10 years, but they have come around to it. We have an implementation team that the state would have, that Iowa should have and develop, that meets on a regular basis. And our implementation team, we still meet on a monthly basis, because we still find out we have stuff that we need to talk about and decide. And not only, we may not do so much about implementing anymore, but it's more kind of about running the program and what needs to be done. And we can update behavioral health and VR on the different programs and what's going on in them. But we also provide statewide trainings throughout the year. And we also, so we talk about that. And we also do an annual training for everybody where we get them together and do like an annual conference with training for about 2.5 days too. So the implementation team kind of monitors all that and works on that. And the agencies really need to believe in the value of work. And it's got to start from the top down, that they believe that work matters, that work promotes recovery. I just can't stress that enough. The agencies that you're working for have to believe that. I've seen agencies, not in IPS, but in traditional supported employment, where, the employment staff believe people can work, but the other staff, no, they can't work, or they could really care less about that. and it just, the program usually would never really get taken off the ground very well. So the belief from the hires up, the whole agency's got to believe in the value of work, and that, you know, people get jobs, and that's what they'll see. That's what this program proves, is that people will get jobs. So you have to have buy-in from the top down. So that's one of the reasons on the Fidelity review that they talk to that executive director and find out his perspective on IPS. And they want, you know, we'll get into it, but part of it is the IPS supervisor should talk to that executive director at least twice a year about the IPS program. So we do want that buy-in from the top down. And it works so well if you have it. Oops. All right, I better watch where I'm clicking. So here's a quote from an IPS CEO at Communicare. And Communicare was one of the original programs that we had here in Kentucky. And I have to say this, they have taken the IPS program and they have ran with it. They embraced it and they have gone. They are the only community mental health center that has an IPS program in all 8 of their counties that they cover. So it's in all 8 of their counties. And this is what Dan Sensom is their CEO, and this is what he says about it. This program is a win-win. There's no way not to win with this program. We are improving people's lives. What better way to get back on your feet than a job? The program sells itself. So he has always been 100% behind the program, and it has grown and thrived with that. And it pretty much, well, it does support itself. And I know getting started, it's hard for a program to support itself, but when it comes on, they do support themselves, or can support themselves. All right, so I'm almost to the end of the program right now. And I'm talking about references and resources. Everything that you heard me talk about is available on this IPS worksite. If you're interested in IPS supported employment and thinking about doing a program, I highly encourage you to go to this website, look at all the information they have. I mean, they've got a library that has hundreds of documents in it about implementation and working, and it, you know, it has documents on the supervisor's role, the employment specialist role. If you're interviewing they have interview questions for interviewing for a supervisor or a supported employment specialist. They have implementation guides. They have agency readiness to see if you're ready to implement. They have job development. They have all kinds of videos. You saw that short video they've got longer videos too, that they can use that. It's just, I'm on it daily. So I highly suggest that you go and look at that if you're interested. You saw me, we have this Supported Employment Fidelity Review Manual. That's a great resource too, especially when you're getting ready for a Fidelity review and wanting to know what to expect. And there's an implementation guide that will help you if you're going to implement the program, how you do it, what is best practices to do that and get that done. And then one of the best guides that I have found is it's a book that was written by Sarah Swanson and Bob Drake. It's called IPS, A Practical Guide. And it really walks you through how to do IPS and how it works. And then this last one that I have here is my cohorts and I, we have a toolkit that we put together. We started it, I think, in 2016 or 2017. And it's just an IPS toolkit, and I think it's got a lot of wonderful things that you can look at that kind of gives you at a glance stuff if you want to look at that. So there's the website to that. And now I'm ready to take any questions. I know I've gone over it pretty fast. I think I'm not used to talking and not hearing anybody. This is hard. It's really different not hearing people talking and answering questions right there.
Thanks, Teresa. This is Jess. Folks, if you want to share any questions, comments, feedback, thoughts in the chat there, or you're welcome to unmute as well and share those. We'll give you a second here to do that. Oops.
No questions? I can't believe I did that good of a job of going over everything, that nobody has any questions.
You did, but here, Lynn asked a question, but it's a great poll question actually. So let me put this up, and I'll read it out loud here. Let me get the poll going and we'll see. Oops. Oh, well, I guess I don't have a poll option. Rats. Okay, well, the question was, who of you have heard about IPS before, or is this new info for you? And so we've got some folks answering. Robin shares, we've been doing IPS in the Central Iowa Community Services, and then that's a region. Kay shares, great presentation.
Thank you.
And Latoya says, can we put the link to the IPS toolkit in the chat? I think we sure can.
If I can, yeah, I should be able to do that.
Right. I was going to say, I think I might be able to pull it too from your slide if you can't.
Well, let's see.
Yeah, Kelly says, yeah, 43 North Iowa. Yes, you guys have been doing IPS for a while now. And Rachel shares that they've been doing 2 pilots up in Northwest Iowa since 2018.
All right.
Perfect. Yes, thank you, Teresa.
And I also put in the IPS Works website.
Hi, this is Amy Dessenberg-Wines, and I just want to
Oh, we lost you, Amy.
Yeah.
thank Teresa and Lynn for everything that's been.
Hey, Amy, this is Jess. Sorry to interrupt, but your audio is cutting in and out. We've only gotten just a couple of your words there. We'll give her a second here. Teresa, so question from Sue-Ann, or comment, let's see, Teresa, as Iowa looks to scale up IPS, what would you think are critical factors to be considered?
I think probably putting together your implementation team, statewide implementation team, and then really looking at the programs that you have there that want to do it, maybe putting out an RFP for programs and starting with those. And it probably wouldn't start with more than, we started with 4. And our plan was to start with 3, and because we had some money that behavioral health was giving us, and we had 3 programs. Another program was able to get some grant money from a different agency, and so they started with it too. So we started with 4. I wouldn't start with any more than that, but just kind of start small and build your way up. I think that's really critical. Having an IPS state trainer. I'm not just saying that because I'm an IPS state trainer, but when we implemented in Kentucky, I was working for VR, and I was over the community rehabilitation programs and part of the supported employment programs. So having that trainer to be able to go in and work with the programs and work on the implementation, helping them is really, really important. And so I think that's probably the key.
Thanks, Teresa. Hey, this is Lynn Niblink, and I just wanted to jump in and kind of let the cat out of the bag. So we know that Hope Haven Rock Valley, or Hope Haven Inc. up in Northwest Iowa, and 43 North Iowa, which used to be NIVIC, they have been very successfully running some IPS pilots for about 2 years. And so we looked at, we've looked at Medicaid and voc rehab services funding to figure out how we can continue, how the state of Iowa can continue to support those services. And then the other thing that we're looking at through this project with ODEP is the implementation planning. So we're looking at the success that they've had in those pilot programs and putting together a proposal or a plan for how we can replicate that success, hopefully in the future, across at least maybe 3 or 4 sites, or we'll call them teams, per year to start out with. So look for that, information on that to come more in the future.
That sounds great. And I think another key thing is to be sure you follow that Fidelity plan, the Fidelity map, the Fidelity review form, and because you really want to do this with Fidelity for it to work. So with this, by saying that, a program in Northeast Iowa should look just like a program in Southwest Iowa. Or any program in Iowa should look just like any program in North Carolina. And just like any program in Kentucky, we should look like a program in Montreal. Montreal should look like a program in Kentucky. I mean, it should just be, that's what Fidelity does, is it makes it the same in every place.
See, Amy shared, we are super excited about trying to get Iowa's system to be able to support IPS in Iowa. Our Iowa pilots have done an amazing job over a short period of time. There is great value in bringing this evidence-based practice of employment service to Iowa, and thank you to everybody. Lynn says, good point, Teresa. We want to implement the evidence-based practice of IPS, not something else.
Right.
That we don't know how well it goes.
We know this works, and it works everywhere. So that is the good thing, is one of the great things about this. And even in my role with VR, as we did things, I took essences or pieces of IPS and would use it with other programs. I had a program that what we in Kentucky, we call the other ones our traditional programs. And they hadn't had a placement in 5 years, just to tell you. So we did a performance improvement plan on them. And this is what I said. I said, I want your employment specialists, they're going to have to go out each week and make me 3 face-to-face contacts with an employer. So I cut it down in half, just 3. And in 30 days, they had a placement. So that just shows you how working with some of these principles just can really work.
Right, yeah. That's that systematic, strategic job development, right?
Right.
Part of that, yeah.
And that's really important, doing that systematic job development and developing those, everything's key in here. So, but developing those key relationships with employers is so important. Because if you're good with one employer, they can help you get your foot in the door with another employer too. So you can use that to network.
Rachel, who's out of the Northwest Iowa project up at Hope Haven, says, or My Choice Employment says, I appreciated what you said about the Fidelity reviewers being collaborators. It was a bit nerve-wracking to have our first Fidelity review, but we got great feedback on how to improve our programs.
Yeah, it's never meant to be. It's never meant to be something as a punishment. It's always meant to look at just to see what you're doing well and what you can do better. So we're looking at how you can improve on things. And I don't care. Nobody's perfect, and there's going to be no perfect program. So there's always room for improvement. Thank you.